Okay, but I will just get started now. So welcome everybody to this very first AnaEE-ERIC Science Communication webinar. I'm the Communications Officer of AnaEE-ERIC, and for those of you who are not familiar with the organization, I will give you a really quick 2-minute presentation of who and what we are and what we do. But before that, I wanted to present to you what we're going to do, what's the kind of goal with this webinar, and hopefully the outcome for you as participants, and then present a little bit about AnaEE-ERIC. And then I will leave the floor to Tania Jenkins, who I'm co-hosting this webinar together with, and she's taking over the lion part of the webinar. So I have been working previously with journalism, investigative journalism on the public radio and TV in Finland before I joined this network of scientists about 1.5 years ago. So storytelling is kind of close to my heart. I also studied documentaries, so I like that aspects of the communications. And so what is AnaEE-ERIC? What are we doing here? And who are we? So you can call it, AnaE stands for Analysis and Experimentations on Ecosystems. It's a European collaborative organization and research network. And so we bring together more than 20, you could say, universities and institutions that are doing something within ecosystem research in Europe. So we have 7 member countries and their institutions are then linked to this organization. And so we can see in the big picture here on the slide, one of our facilities, which is open air, so-called, and in different ways we can manipulate the ecosystem to see how it's reacting to future climate scenarios. And so this is a highly controlled environment. So even the sun is artificial here. We can decide on the soil composition. We can decide on the greenhouse gas levels. And so we can see how maybe future climate scenarios, how plants and other microbes and stuff react to climate change or pollution. And as I said, it's a pan-European organization. So we have member countries from Finland down to south of Italy, covering everything from subarctic climate and environment to tropical. Actually, it's not in the picture, but we also have facilities in tropical environments. And we can test this kind of experimentation on managed, unmanaged land, forests, agroecosystems, and peatlands. And of course, if you're interested in finding out more about this, then you can go to the website, and we have a comprehensive catalog of services where we present all of these facilities and their capabilities closer. Okay, so now I will leave the floor and lion part of the workshop to Tania Jenkins. And so shortly about her, she's a science communicator based in Switzerland. She's the founder of COSY, and she has experience with designing and running a range of science communication workshops, from exhibitions, science festivals, interactive games, hackathons, and especially close to her heart is then citizen science, after we spoke a bit. And as a former researcher, she strongly believes in researchers as communicators and participates to events for researchers where they learn to become more effective communicators. And yeah, I forgot to say, so the goal with the webinar, of course, it's that you scientists, or many of people working with scientists, you are really interested in what you're doing and the scientific research itself. But we hope that with this webinar, we can explain to you why we think that science communication is really important, and to reach a wider audience than maybe your own bubble where you're doing the research. So now, Tania Jenkins, please, maybe you want to also explain a little bit about what you're working on right now, and let's begin.
Thank you very much, Amanda, and hello everyone from me. It's a great pleasure to be here. It's a great honor to be here. I myself am a former ecologist, an evolutionary ecologist. So working with ecologists is a matter which is very close to my heart. As Amanda said, I've been working in science communication for the last 9 years now. And the first activity today, the first rule of science communication, if you like, is to know your audience. So who are you? Who am I? I'm not speaking with you directly, unfortunately, but I would like to know where you are joining us from today. So if you haven't already, please, can you join the Padlet? The link is in the chat. Alternatively, you can also scan with the QR code that you can see on the screen. And then just tell me where you're joining in. At the end, we'll have a nice visual map of where you're joining and any other information that you'd like to share with us today. So today, in this part of the webinar, what we are going to cover is, first of all, what is science communication? We've heard a lot about it, but what is it? Why? I will touch upon why it is important to communicate as a scientist. I will touch upon a few examples, some of which are from my own work. And I will close with a few tips on how to communicate science. So, first and only actual practical activity today, what is science communication? What examples are you familiar with from your work or from what others are doing or from what you know? So again, here is a link to another Padlet. You can either scan it or Amanda can paste the link in the chat, if that's okay, Amanda. And yeah, feel free to just add all of the different activities that you may be aware of, and we'll return back to this later. So perhaps disclaimer, I'm half Greek and I grew up in Greece. So for me, everything goes back to ancient Athens. So one of the first examples of science communication, one would argue, perhaps one of the first examples of public education, was in the Agora of ancient Athens, where scientists, so actually the natural philosophers of the time, would get together and talk about their findings and about philosophy. And so this was open to the free citizens of Athens, so no women or slaves, and they had the opportunity to discuss the teachings with the ancient philosophers. And so one could argue that this is one of the first examples of science communication. However, modern science as we know it was born during the scientific revolution in the late 16th century. And during this period, the term science became more well known, and actually the term science stuck. And it became known as the system of the acquisition of knowledge based on a particular scientific method, which is based on research and the organization and classification of this knowledge acquired. So basically, modern science as we know it today, what you and me have done and are doing. So in this picture, we see one of the first examples of public communication. It's the annual meeting of the British Association of Science, the BSA. And this is basically a conference where scientists presented their findings, not just to their peers, which are seated alongside them, but also to the general public. And what I find interesting here is that actually this public contains quite a lot of women. So even though there aren't very many well-known female scientists of the time, there was great interest in science also from women. And it was at such a historic meeting that Thomas Huxley, supposedly Darwin's bulldog, defended the theory of evolution against Samuel Wilberforce. So we can see that already back then, science communication was incredibly important in getting the findings of the research known to the broader public. So let's take a step back a second. What exactly is science communication? What is, in fact, communication? Communication, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, is the transmission or exchange of information, knowledge or ideas by means of speech, writing, mechanical or electronic media, etc. So transmission from a transmitter to a receiver. Now, there are lots of definitions of science communication, but science communication, the one I like the most is that by Burns et al. 2003, where he defines it as the use of appropriate skills, media, activities, and dialogue to produce one or more of the following. So here we see that science communication actually should and does have a goal. Now, this goal could be awareness. Oh, now I know something, or I think I know something about this. For example, in my research, now I used to work on malaria in birds. And the question I always got was, what? Birds get malaria here in Europe? And I was like, yes. So the fact that in 1 minute I managed to convey this information meant that people were aware that birds get malaria, bird malaria, here in Europe. Another goal could be enjoyment. It's okay for people to have fun while they are interacting with science. Another goal could be just to also stimulate someone's interest. Of course, if you have very limited time, the first 3 goals are actually the most attainable. To spark someone's interest in science is a very venerable goal. And then as you engage more, you can also have the goal to help form people's opinions. And finally, to also build on their knowledge bases, to in fact educate them. So we can see that actually science communication can start just from making someone aware of something and can end to really deep learning, depending on what form of science communication you choose. Now, the final part of Burns's definition is that, like, who communicates science? Science communication can be done by a range of people. It can involve science practitioners, it can involve mediators, it can even involve members of the general public, and it can be peer-to-peer, so between scientists, or it can also be between scientists and the public. So this brings us to an important point of who communicates science. Science is obviously communicated by institutions such as research centers, universities, museums. AnaEE-ERIC also is active in communicating science, by funders, by media, but also companies can communicate science, and individuals can also communicate science on, for example, social media. So what we've covered so far is what is science communication. And now I'd like to bring it back to you and see on the Padlet what examples of science communication you have provided today. I can see already that there are blog posts, newsletters, social media, videos, articles, conferences, IPCC reports, newsletters, magazines. Great, and feel free to carry on contributing to this panel of science communication. While I cover why it is important. So science is relevant to most aspects of our daily lives. It's not just about our knowledge of science, but it's also our attitude towards science that influences our perception of the environment and of the current crises that we are facing, such as the biodiversity crisis, such as the climate crisis. It also can influence important things, such as whether we accept vaccination or not, which have obviously public health consequences. It can also be a driver of innovation. And now the European Commission, and for instance, through the Horizon Europe program, has recognized this for a long time, that science is very important to drive innovation. The more basic research we have, the more knowledge base we have to drive future innovation, which may be important someday down the road. Science, however, needs public support to thrive because most of science is funded by taxpayers' money. However, what happens when there is a distrust of science? And now I'm referring to a Eurobarometer that was done in 2010. So Eurobarometers, for those that don't know, are surveys of public opinion that tackle different topics. And in 2010, a Eurobarometer identified that a majority of European citizens, 53% in fact, indicated that scientists, because of their knowledge, have a power that makes them dangerous. So what we see here was that back in 2010, there was actually a fear of scientists. Now, where did this fear come from? Where did this distrust of science come from? So back in the 1990s, when I was a child, there were some science communication disasters and some major science communication failures. It was thought back then that a scientist's job was to be in the research center, in the lab, and do the science, and for the research to be communicated by science journalists. Now, some science journalists may or may not have science training. As a result, there was a divide in how science was done and how science was communicated. And as a result, there were some public health and food scares and disasters. We all remember the mad cow disease. Well, for those of us who were alive then, and the GMO debates of the time. Now, actually, one thing that is interesting is that the COVID-19 pandemic had a significant impact on science communication, and it led to actually positive and transformative changes, because the pandemic brought science, especially epidemiology and virology, to the forefront of daily life. At the time, it was important that information became accessible. Scientific institutions, scientists, public health institutions joined forces. Scientists were also at the forefront of the communication. And together, there was also clear messaging, live updates, very good visuals. And it's actually now recognized as a science communication success story. At the time as well, which is unfortunately is not so the case right now, there was also proactive misinformation management. And so it meant that everyone was working together to try and communicate the science of COVID more effectively. As a result, science became more humanized, trust in science increased, and the pandemic pushed the importance of expert guidance. And so the Eurobarometer that was conducted later on showed that actually, just a second, a majority of respondents wanted scientists to intervene in the political debate and trust them to say the truth. So here in dark blue and in light blue, we see more positive attitudes towards scientists intervening in political debates. However, what we see is that this increased trust is mainly from younger respondents of the survey, from respondents who are better educated, and from respondents that are actually more financially well off. So the acceptance of science and the greater trust in science is not something which is cross-sectoral across all parts of society. So another very important aspect of science communication is who, in fact, is communicating it and where are people getting their news from. So according to a study by the Pew Research Center in 2017, what they found was that actually most people get their science news from social media. Now, we live in a time that, as Tom Nichols refers to in his book, The Death of Expertise, anyone can be claimed to be an expert. There are social media influencers in all fields, from food, from health to disease, and they can spread whatever scientific story they want. And several research now show that actually fake news spread better than a non-fake news, which makes the extent of the phenomenon actually worse. So what is the solution to all of this? According to the OECD, we are at a time that we must all be able to think critically as scientists. This means that it is essential that citizens are able to use and apply scientific thinking in their decisions. At a time of massive information influx, at a point where the world evolves rapidly, we must all be able to think as scientists, is what they say. But how do we achieve that? Unfortunately, we can't. There's a whole field of the science of science communication. And what this decades of research has actually shown is that we can't just give people more information. We can't just tell them, okay, here are the facts, and I know better than you because I'm a scientist, just read the report and get on with it. No, people are not going to necessarily accept the science just because they have all of the facts available to them. Not even people that can understand the science and have the abilities to understand the science will respond well to that. And so what the research on science of science communication actually shows is that dialogue is important. And so we must move from a pure transmission of knowledge to real mediation, facilitation, and exchange, and actually building on shared values. And here is where we see actually a shift of roles from dissemination to actually engagement and facilitation. So which formats actually promote dialogue? Now I'd like you to go back to the Padlet that you were on previously and to put a little heart next to which formats that you've seen on this Padlet. And you can comment on other people's posts or add notes and say which formats actually promote dialogue. Now, of course, there are a lot of formats that don't have any dialogue. For example, I was involved in animations where we discussed different types of education science practices and the science behind how to optimize education. And this was just an animation that was posted on social media. I've also been involved in creating plays with scientific information in them, such as the Blue Butterfly play that we did 10 years ago now in Switzerland. Most museum exhibitions, so if you look here at the bottom right, here's a museum exhibition that we did on parasites in Lausanne back in 2017. Most exhibitions themselves are a one-way form of communication. In fact, I'm sure that if we go back to the Padlet now, actually most of the examples there are actually examples of transmission and a one-way format of communication. But it's not all lost. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have one-way formats of communication, but we should also think about how we can use these formats to promote dialogue. So even if you are involved in the creation of an exhibition, you can also think about how to use that exhibition as a platform for dialogue. So here in our case, at the museum in Lausanne, we had an exhibition on parasites, and we had an accompanying event where we invited scientists to share their research on parasites through informal discussions with members of the public. And we also invited the exhibition designer to think about and to share with members of the public how he thought of the concept of the museum exhibition design. There are lots of different ways of thinking about dialogue. Here on the top left, we have Marie in a science speed dating event. She is talking with the teacher about her research on mating systems of plants. In the top right-hand corner, it's a fishbowl exercise, and this was an event on gene technology. Now, as we know, gene technology is a very highly sensitive topic, and so we had people who were very passionate about this topic, both from science and also from activism. So there we had to think about how to best mediate the dialogue. So we had professional facilitators present. We organized a format where everyone was able to speak, very Swiss. So yeah, we had to think about how to look after this dialogue, how to maintain it so that it doesn't break down. And at the bottom right is me sharing my passion from my research at the time with a child and his dad at the marketplace in Lausanne. So there are plenty of opportunities to actually talk about science. At another level of participation, you can also get people to actually do science and think about science in a more interactive way. So here again, using the exhibition that I showed you earlier, the museum wanted to attract a different crowd to the exhibition, so a crowd that wouldn't normally attend. And so they thought, okay, why not create a fun and engaging format to get people into the exhibition in the first place? And so here we designed an escape game. So basically we shut people into the exhibition and we pretended that the exhibition was the host, and people had to search for different clues in order to escape from the exhibition, in order to escape from the host. And the final clue was unlocked with a massive sneeze, which then opened the doors of the exhibition. So this was like a team-based game. People had fun. Here the goal was for people to have fun, not to necessarily gain a lot of knowledge, and to incite them to then come back and really explore the exhibition further. Of course, at the kind of more participatory end is also citizen science. So here we have a project that I was recently involved in where I co-created research with fishers from Lake Geneva. And here they were involved in all parts of the scientific process, from the co-design of the research question to the actual data collection. We see people here collecting water samples with these hose pipes, and also to the communication. So here we see actually that the fishers themselves were actually really the best communicators for the project by posting on their Instagram accounts, on their fishery Instagram accounts. This actually maximized the reach of the entire project. Okay, so I've now given some examples of science communication that are close to my heart. I would like to just see which examples of your communication you think are examples of two-way communication. And I see, yeah, articles, conferences, and posters. Yeah, that can be two-way, of course, because, for example, at conferences during poster sessions, there can be discussions, there can be Q&As. Conferences and social media, indeed. Yeah. Yeah, so exactly. So in social media, I guess there can also be a two-way interaction. So often, even if you have a video or a post or something you want to say, you should also think about, okay, how can I get people to engage in conversation, even if it is an online conversation about it? So where can you actually communicate science? Well, I would argue everywhere, and as we've just seen in social media, traditional media, museums, science in the city events. Someone had also mentioned researcher nights in the Padlet, museum nights, field and lab visits, as well as in citizen science. And so it's important to pick a format that you like. So just because someone invites you to join a researcher's night, it doesn't mean you have to do that if you don't really feel comfortable in engaging face-to-face with members of the public. You can also say, okay, I like writing, so I'll do a blog post for AnaEE-ERIC, for example, or something else. I guess the idea is to see what opportunities are available and then to think about how to craft the message and at what level you want the communication to take place. And this then, of course, brings me to my final point, which are my tips on how to communicate science. And here I would like to share the 10 tips that have helped me think about science communication and that I think are of value to researchers on how to best communicate science. So I think any form of communication, even a scientific article, should start from what is the goal of the communication. And here we can go back to the typology of Burns. Is it the goal just to create awareness? Is it enjoyment? Is it interest? Do you want to change someone's mind? Do you want to increase understanding? Because then you know what level the engagement will be and how much information you should include and how to then choose the key points of your message. You should also then think very carefully about who your public is. So are they kids? Are they teachers? Are they fishers? Are they farmers? Are they policymakers? All of these people and target groups have different needs and different requirements and different interests. And they're not necessarily going to engage with something that they don't care about. So you've also then got to think about what they care about. So I would always start with what the goal and message of my communication is and who the public is. And then I would try and distill it and align this with their interests. So for instance, if my public are gardeners, I would use examples from gardening, or I would maybe organize something to do with, I don't know, biodiversity in gardens to try and illustrate my scientific point. And then depending on the amount of time available and what my goal is for the communication, I would pick at what level I want to pitch the goal. Now, as I said, I'm a big fan of dialogue. And here it's really important to talk with people and not to people, and to allow them to speak as well. So what I find when I'm running events often with scientists is that scientists are there and they just speak all the time because they feel that they have to speak all the time. Sometimes it's also interesting to take on board what people are saying and then to respond to what they're saying to build on the conversation. And then that's when that communication actually becomes more satisfying for both parties. It's also very important not to make it an attack on people's beliefs just because someone doesn't necessarily believe in evolution or in climate change. Yes, you can beg to differ, but it's also important to try and understand perhaps where they're coming from. It may be difficult. And at that point, to try to find common ground, which again may be difficult, but at least it can give you a sense of where they may be coming from and what misconceptions you would need to look at and address to discuss with them in the future. It's also important to avoid hierarchies. So as scientists, we often think that our role is to educate people. And even though public education is a very great goal, it's not the only goal. And a lot of people don't like to be educated once they've left school. So it's important to not underestimate their knowledge. They bring in perhaps different types of knowledge. So for instance, the fishers I've worked with have a huge and tremendous amount of local knowledge about their ecosystem. And they really understand it in different ways than the scientists that work on the lake. And that is really interesting to try and see and build projects with them to see where they are actually coming from. Of course, it's really important to pay attention to presentation. So if you're giving a talk, PowerPoints with a lot of text, and it's important to pay attention to design. It's important so that people don't fall asleep to try and change the tone of your voice and the pitch. That's what I've been trying to do today. It's crucial that we avoid jargon. So, for instance, instead of species complementarity, you can talk about species working better together. If no one understands you, then there's no point in trying to even communicate. So often using metaphors and analogies is also another way of getting over this, overcoming this barrier. And one thing that I've also found is that it's important to tell a story. And humans are actually emotional animals, and we love stories. And so good communication often starts from a good story. You don't have to convey all of the information, all of the facts of your research. You can also pick one element of that. You can also say the story of your study system or your story. What brought you to actually study this particular topic? I mean, how much work goes through one scientific paper? What sacrifices have you made? So people are actually more likely to relate to you as a person than to the 1,000 facts that you're going to tell them to convince them about the existence of climate change. So here I have an example of a story that we created at a science festival, and I was a master storyteller for that event, and we told the story of a mystical city called Cryptopolis. And we asked children here to choose the future of the city, and they had to choose, they had to go to different science workshops and piece together different informations of the puzzle. And at the end, they had to come to a public consultation to choose the future of the city. And we had 4 different possible futures, and here was the kind of a version of the city, of a green city. It's really important to be aware of misconceptions. For example, most scientists don't necessarily look. Whenever you type in scientist, you always get a photograph into Google. You get a photo of a mad scientist, often white, often male, often wearing these goggles and a lab coat. But we know that scientists can actually look very different. And, you know, they can carry ladders, they can be in the forest, they can climb trees. They don't necessarily work in a lab. In addition, another matter close to my heart is that of the misconception of the theory of evolution. This kind of ubiquitous graphic that we see, that we have come from apes and we are the direct, result of years and years of evolution to become the superior human beings that we are. And this is an example. It's even been published in Swiss newspapers, this misconception, but also even in scientific journals such as Nature and Science, we see images of this misconception, when actually the truth is that apes are actually our cousins. So be aware of common misconceptions and also try and address them. So that's why it's important to actually listen to people and see what misconceptions they have and try and address them head on. So another point which I kind of think is critical is to think about communication from the start. So often communication and dissemination is work package 5 in a Horizon Europe project. And actually, in my opinion, it should be work package 1. It should be thought alongside coordination and what activities you're going to run and what outcomes you want, what the scientific impact, what the societal impact of a project should be. And in order to do that, in order to make sure that you have and you allocate enough resources, you have to think about it at the start of the process and not just rely on what kind of things you have left at the end of a project in order to do it and in order to reach and actually be effective in your communication. And so here I also refer back to the example of CoFish, the co-created citizen science project that we ran with fishers, where they were actually involved in the co-design of the project, the data collection, parts of the analysis, and in the communication, as here we have a fisher presenting at a conference. So I'm not saying that all projects have to necessarily look like this, but it's important to think about what societal impact you want to have at the start of a project. Oh, so this is an example. I just wanted to show you an example of our fishers' Instagram. And the beautiful lake that we're working on. So it's really important to, you're all scientists, we're all scientists, to evaluate, to know if we've met our goals. It's important to prove to yourself that you've met your goals in order to include it in your science communication practice to become better communicators. It's important to prove to funders that you've actually achieved the societal impact of a project. Often we fill out the impact sections and then we think, oh gosh, what did I do in the end? So it's important, as I said earlier, to think about this at the start. And And there are a million ways you can evaluate. Some of them are more formal and more boring, but there are also fun ways at the end of an event with post-its, with stickers, and you can also offer little rewards. I don't know, free hat, or I don't know, something related to your research, that someone can then take away with them. And yeah, have fun with it. You can get creative. There are a million things that one could possibly do, and you could also then create and even invent your own format. And this is a picture of an art activity that we run for an organization I volunteer for, called Evoke, where we get scientists in a conference to relax, to basically create their own art. And this, I like it because it breaks a misconception that scientists aren't creative, because actually the things that they come up with are incredible. Okay, so with that, I would like to say thank you to Amanda and to AnaEE-ERIC for inviting me and for hosting me. If you'd like to get in touch with me, these are my details. I'm happy to take questions once after I hand over first to Amanda, because she has a few more things that she would like to share with you about how AnaE can help with communication. So thanks a lot, and over to you, Amanda.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tania. There was a lot of good examples and ideas that we will take with us for the next AnaE Science Conference, which will be in 2026, and to have some more interactivity and workshops. So I was thinking that I could try to share actually a video, because you talked about the fact that personal kind of presentations or saying something about yourself, it can be more efficient than talking about all the million facts. Why is climate change real, or why is my scientific results true? And the most seen video that we made last year for AnaEE-ERIC's part is actually this very spontaneous thing we made when we visited one of the facilities in the south of France. And there was a Erasmus summer school going on, and I just gave a microphone and asked these three young science students how they think about climate change and why they are studying climate change. So I can show you this short clip, maybe not the whole, but you get the idea.
My name is Karl. I'm from Germany, from Frankfurt, and I study sociology in the master's program.
Hi, I'm Armina. I'm also from Germany. I'm doing my master in Goethe University in a field called Science and Technology Studies.
Hi, my name is Agnes. I come from Estonia. I'm a PhD student in the Estonian Forestry, Estonian University of Life Sciences. We are here to study the effects of climate change on Mediterranean forests. We've seen a lot of different aspects of climate change, and also how to study it, how to measure these different effects, and every part of the world would be affected differently.
The key takeaway is that you can relate yourself to.
Now I will begin then with so we'll show you what sort of tools we have within AnaEE-ERIC and how we can help you, because maybe not everyone is super interested in trying to have a great outreach with their science communication. So what is the added value by belonging to a network such as AnaEE-ERIC? So we already, like, you might work in your university or institution, but through AnaEE-ERIC, we are connected to more than 20 research institutions and universities, and our outreach will reach, when it's effectively done, it reaches all over Europe. So if you have something interesting to say and you reach out to us, and we can create a small story about that and put it in the newsletter, put it on our website and on social media, then it can reach a wider audience just like that. And also we are linked, we are already an umbrella organization, but we are also linked to other umbrella organizations, for example, ENVRI, which is the Environmental Research Infrastructure Consortium, which is bringing together all research infrastructure. Some are studying the sea, it's ENVRI, no, EMBRC, and then we have some that are studying more like greenhouse gases and measuring those, and they bring them all under one roof, and we have different exchanges. Like during EGU, we had a joint booth, which was really, really nice, and a lot of scientists and researchers came there, so we can have this kind of common outreach activities and reach even further. And so what sort of communication channels do AnaEE-ERIC offer then? So we have a website with close or more or less 4,000 unique visitors per year. We have a quarterly newsletter with more than 400 contacts within the environmental and ecology scientific field, and more than 200 online readings, so it might be even additional to those 400 that we reach by email. Then we have representation on big events, among others. This year we went to EGU, and then we have different social media channels like YouTube, and LinkedIn has been growing quite rapidly from about 400 a year and a half ago. Now we are over 1,000. We have more than 1,000 followers, and our YouTube videos have more than 500 views by now, I think. So this is all different channels where we can have outreach. And as I mentioned before, we are doing constant networking with other research infrastructures and other types of organizations. And then in 2026, please mark your calendar, because we're going to have our second science conference in the south of France and in the Mediterranean, open for all AnaEE-ERIC community and beyond. We also welcome people who are not members to join. You can find more information about the conference and other events on our website, of course, under news and events. And then we have also access to professional tools like DaVinci Resolve, Canva. We have Affinity Publisher now as well, all the Microsoft package, so we can do different kind of productions. If you provide us with the news or information, we can package it and publish it on our channels. And so what's coming now for AnaEE-ERIC is that we are updating the website visually. It's going to be published by the end of the year. And then now, as AnaEE-ERIC starts to have more and more activities, we started being active and having projects, because if you're a scientist and you want to do scientific research, you can apply to use AnaEE-ERIC facilities directly through our website, but then you will have to find the funding yourself. It might be 5,000 or 50,000 euro, and you have to find the funding. But if you find a project, a Horizon Europe project, you might also apply through those and get free access to the facilities. So the project is funding your research. Okay, so this is one activity that has gotten started now during the past year and a half, 2 years. Different thematics like AquaServe, which is aquatic research program, and then AgroServe, which is agroecology transition. And so now that we are starting to have more and more activities, by the end of the year or within a year, I hope that we start also having more opinion and position papers and stuff like that. And there you can also, of course, be involved as much as you want. Then we are updating the stakeholder page, and we are gathering success stories. We have quite a few now, and we're going to publish them on the new website as well as having a more comprehensive calendar feature on the page. And so, as I just showed you this LinkedIn video, it was kind of spontaneous, nothing fancy, but it worked very well. It had more than 3,000 impressions on our social media. When we normally reach, we have a few hundred per post we do. It depends quite a lot. Sometimes it's some tens, some dozens, and sometimes it's thousands. Then, of course, different type of projects and funding opportunities get a lot of attention. Free money, it's always interesting. Job announcements get quite a good spread, and different type of events also. So if you are part of the community of AnaEE-ERIC and you have an event, maybe a training, maybe a summer school, something that could be of interest to a wider group within AnaEE-ERIC, you can always reach out to us or directly to me, and we will help you to promote that event. And then also science stories is something that I would like to work more on, but maybe, as I said, I'm the only communications officer in the whole organization, so my resources, I don't have that much time to do this kind of stories, but I did one about Chinese mitten crabs. It was a bit a coincidence, or it was a bit random that I heard about this story when I was visiting a site, but it was really interesting how they it was one of the most successful projects to prevent the invasive species to spread in Europe. It was a type of crab that they caught, and it was a guy who worked in one of our facilities who had been part of that or leading that project. So it got quite a good spread as well. And then before moving on to any questions and questions you might have, I wanted to mention a few upcoming events that could be of interest for anyone in this community. So we have news and events. You go to our website, you click news and events, and then you choose events, and we list them by chronology. So we have some webinars one project that we are part of and some of our services are offered through is Microbes for Climate, about microplastics. And they have a webinar about how to access their facilities, how you can apply to have access to that on May 19. Then we have next week, together with AgroServe, we provide a webinar on how to improve your ISIA skills. So ISIA is the catalog of services where we present all our research capacity, and to have applications, to have people to come and use your facility, to be part of these kind of projects and get a bit of visibility also, you should present your facility in a nice way so that it's very, so it's attractive. So we have a workshop and a webinar about that next week. Please register. And then, as I said before, we are opening also for direct calls. This is a kind of a big thing. It's the first direct open call for AnaEE services. We haven't really promoted it big time yet, but we will do it really shortly. Just have to test the application form, but everything is kind of ready to be opened the 2nd of June. And then we have a webinar on June 13 where we present a bit what sort of research you can do using AnaEE-ERIC facilities. And yes, as I mentioned a few times, mark your calendar, AnaEE Science Conference, September 29 to October 1. We already have a conference website, so you can go there and have a look, but we are updating it, and there will be registration and so forth will open in the autumn of 2025. And subscribe to our newsletter, links on many pages on our website to stay up to date, and connect on our social media to have postings coming in real time. So yes, so the summary is that AnaEE-ERIC Communications, we can support you by creating engaging social media content in collaboration with you, of course. And if we do interviews, etc., I always run the interview through the scientist one more time before we publish it, so that you have control over what's being written. We can create videos. We are visiting our nodes little by little. We can give some more spread and visibility to your institution, to your research through our network, and hopefully then have some impact, that your science has some impact through these policy papers, etc. So please, I'm here for you, so you can always reach out to me, and I will help you as much as I can with whatever questions you might have to help you with outreach and creating visual content that you can spread or use, or we can spread together. So yeah, you can connect. This QR code goes to a page with links to the projects, open calls that we have, our social media, so feel free to connect. And that's it for me. And if you have any questions about how we work here with the communications, any questions to Tania about successful science communication or this kind of interactive events, please feel free to write in the chat or in the question and answers, or just open your microphone and you can go ahead. Otherwise, that was all for my part.
I'm Helia from Nova School of Business and Economics here at Portugal. I have a question, and my question is quite simple. You've shown us a lot of things that we can do to disseminate science, but my question is, how do you get your professors to get on board with it? Because for me, it's quite difficult to get them to participate in the scientific outreach activities. I'm sorry for my voice, but I'm with a cold.
It's okay. Is that a question to me, or?
Yeah, it is. It is, sorry.
I mean, this is a classic point. I mean, the question also is, do you need them to participate in your activities? When I was a researcher and I was doing science communication on the side for fun, my professors always thought that I was basically doing that instead of my job, whereas I was actually doing that as well as my job. So I guess the question is, a lot of old professors maybe it's too late for some people. Maybe that's okay, because I think the point is that there's a new generation of scientists that are open to communicating, and more young researchers that are actually also becoming experts in their field, and they're the ones with the real passion. So my kind of advice is, sometimes you need a big name and you need a professor there, and that's fine. If you want to convince the policymakers, going back to the target audiences, then bring along your heavyweight professor, try and convince them, or find the one that is going to say yes. There's always at least one that is over engaged because the others are not pulling their weight. Otherwise, find give other people an opportunity, other people that are experts. There are also mid-career, early career people that actually know a lot and can engage actually probably better with the public. So I would basically say, maybe don't fight any losing battles and see where you can build it and create something with people that actually want to be engaged.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, just a question. Thank you very much for this very inspiring presentation. I just was wondering, when you showed us the slide about the goals, you had all these separated goals like awareness and interest and enjoyment, etc. I was wondering how much these are goals and not rather objectives, whereas the goal is more like aiming to a change of behavior. Whereas these are more like objectives and not necessarily separated, because you also would like to end up having people reaching a certain level of awareness by also enjoying them. So I see those as interrelating goals rather than separated ones. Right?
Yeah, of course.
This is the first
so
thing.
They don't
and
necessarily.
Then, again, for me, it's more objectives, and rather the goal is to through all these to reach a change of behavior. Yeah. So.
Okay. So just to, I think there's two separate threads. So yeah, okay, they could be objectives, and these objectives are interrelated. Of course, and they may be interrelated. So interest, enjoyment are linked. If you're enjoying something, then you're more likely to be interested in it, and awareness. So these are the kind of like lighter goals. And these things are constructs which are interrelated. But I wouldn't also necessarily say that behavioral change is something which is incredibly difficult to measure and to evaluate and can take a very long time. So behavioral change is a process that is actually very difficult to think about and to actually have as an overarching goal for one engagement exercise, and maybe a kind of long-term goal for the next 10 years.
Yes.
And it may not be the only goal. So
yeah.
And it may not necessarily be the only goal, right? It can also be behavioral change, but it can also be, I don't know, something else. So it's a good point about the goals and the objectives. Your goal can be larger, such as behavioral changes of behavior, and not only. And yeah, I guess it's objectives rather than goals. So to stimulate interest, to raise awareness. Thanks, that's a great question.
Thank you.
Okay, and now it's 12 o'clock. So as I said, you can also add any questions if you might have something afterwards. And yeah, thank you all for participating. It was a nice mix of people, as you said, Tania.